Good evening and welcome to the third Hardiman Playground community meeting. My name is Lauren Bryant and I'm the project manager for this exciting project for Boston Parks. Before we jump into our presentation, I just want to go over a few how-tos and what to expect tonight. I wanted to let everybody know that interpretation was not requested for this meeting, so tonight's meeting is going to be in English only. However, for future meetings, please know that we want to hear all voices and are able to offer translation and interpretation as requested free of charge for any additional languages. Um, please reach out to me for any information about interpretation, and I can put my email address in the chat for you guys in a little bit. Also want to make sure that everyone knows that tonight's meeting is being recorded and it's going to be available on the project website within about a week. In case you haven't checked out the project website yet, we'll also put that link for you in the chat in a few minutes. I do want to thank all of you who are able to make the meeting tonight. However, we understand that there can be a lot of meetings and a lot of challenges to get to meetings, and you might have friends or neighbors who weren't able to join us tonight. So please share what you learned tonight or direct people to our project website so they can view the meeting recording when they have time. We want to make sure that this conversation feels comfortable for everyone. Please be respectful and mindful of others' time so that everyone has the opportunity to participate. If you aren't comfortable speaking or sharing your thoughts in the chat, please feel free to reach out to me and set up a conversation to share your thoughts. Next slide, please. We want to hear everybody's thoughts and hear from you tonight. That's why we're here. We want to make sure that you all know how to interact with us the best way. I know a lot of people are familiar with Zoom at this point, but just in case you're not, you can add things in the chat or raise your hand. And at the bottom of the screen, you'll see a text bubble icon, and that will allow you to send us a message through the chat. And at the bottom of the screen, there's an icon with 3 dots. And if you click on that, you'll be able to raise your hand if you want to be recognized or called on to speak. Hopefully that takes care of all of the housekeeping. We could sneak to the next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to introduce our project team, do a quick project overview and a quick review from the first pop-up meeting in the park and the second meeting that we had via Zoom. We're going to share some conceptual ideas, and this is going to be broken up a little bit in terms of topics, and then we'll have a short break after each of those topics so that we can get feedback as we go. And then we'll have time for a broader discussion at the end, and we'll be able to jump back to anything that we want to talk about in more depth. Next slide, please. For those who might have joined a little bit late, my name is Lauren Bryant, and I'm the project manager for Boston Parks for this exciting park renovation, as well as several other parks throughout the city. We have a new outreach coordinator with Boston Parks, and her name is Tammy, and we're really excited she's here to join us tonight. She's an excellent resource for park-related items that might not be specific to the renovations of the park, and she also coordinates our friends groups. Tammy, did you want to say a few words about friends groups or anything?
No, thank you, Lauren.
Okay,
Still
perfect. And Warner Larson Landscape Architects are our design team for this project. And tonight you're going to hear from 3 of their team members, David, Samir, and Amy. Next slide, please. Next slide as well, sorry. So first we want to acknowledge that this park is named after Kevin Barry Hardiman, who lost his life in the Marines in 1967 in Vietnam. And we were really grateful to have his family with us at our pop-up meeting in the park. And we are going to be coordinating with them to create a sign in the renovated park to honor him. Next slide, please. So we started our community process back in September with that pop-up in the park that we were talking about. And we had a really great turnout and heard a lot of really great thoughts and ideas about what was working and what wasn't. And then we had a second community meeting in mid-November that we didn't have quite as many people come out to. And so that's why we wanted to have this next meeting that we're having tonight, because we felt like we didn't get as much feedback as we really wanted to be able to hear. But then obviously there was Thanksgiving and Christmas, so we put it off a little bit just to make sure that we could plan it in a time where we could get more people to come to the meeting. So what we're doing is we're doing this third meeting right now to get more feedback on our conceptual designs. And then we're going to come back to the community in the spring in order to do a fourth community meeting where we're going to have our final design to share with you. And at that meeting, we're going to just make sure we got it right. Did we hear you? Did we get the design the way you feel like your park really should feel? We also are shifting the schedule a little bit based on the availability of funds for construction. So we originally had talked about starting construction this fall, but based on the budget cycles and the funding availability, we're looking at the latest starting construction in the spring. And then what we're hoping is to look at phasing the project, because we know there are a lot of users in this park, especially we know the YMCA uses the park a lot for camps, community uses it. So what we're going to try to do is see if we can phase the construction so that we make the most use of the park for the community, and we try not to close it at inopportune times. When we have that next meeting in the spring, hopefully we'll have a more specific time frame for you guys based on that phasing. But we did want to just give everybody a heads up that that's shifting a little, and we'll keep you in the loop as we learn more about that schedule. Next slide, please. And we get asked a lot about park design and how design decisions are made. So we just wanted to share this diagram with you. Some of these items that lead to park design decisions are things like the community input, such as tonight and the other Zoom meeting we had and pop-ups. But it's also, emails that we get, surveys that we've done. That we try to get a lot of different community input in many different ways. There's also safety and regulatory guidelines that lead to design decisions. Things like ADA, right, where we know the playground right now has stairs down into it from the YMCA edge. So trying to make sure we take care of some of those accessibility related items too. And then we also have City of Boston priorities and Parks and Recreation goals. So there's a lot of things that go into that decision making. But the reason we're here tonight is because you guys use this park, this park so much better than we do. So we really want to get your input on it. Next slide, please. Well, and with that, I'm going to actually stop talking and I'm going to turn it over to Amy, and she's going to share more about the project scope with you all.
Thanks, Lauren. So we're going to go over quite a bit today. There's a lot of elements in this park that we'll kind of dive into piece by piece, but overall, the project includes improvements to the play area. That includes the 2 to 5 and 5 to 12 play structures and the water play area. It also includes improvements to the Little League fields, improvements to the dog area, which over the course of the past couple of meetings, we've been talking about formalizing that into a formal dog park. And then in general, we'll get into overall site circulation and accessibility, overall improvements to site amenities, and then the basketball court. And all of this we'll kind of dive into piece by piece. Next slide, please. So I wanted to just touch on the input that we've heard already, because as Lauren mentioned, we've had 2 community meetings so far. The first one was in September and it was on site. And we were able to have a lot of great conversations with people at that meeting. And we talked a lot about the Little League field. We talked about the playground, overall site accessibility and circulation. And some of the things we heard from that meeting was the importance of shade. We heard about the importance of the play structure. We heard what people were kind of looking for in a play structure. Even heard from a couple kids who were playing about what they wanted to see in the play structure. And then we had an online survey that people could take. So this is just a little snapshot of what we heard from that survey. It kind of breaks down into like what you do and what you want to see. And you can kind of see that there's, you know, a big focus on play in the feedback from the survey. Can you go to the next slide, please? In the survey, we were asking a more specific question about what type of play equipment you wanted to see. And so you can see that overwhelmingly people responded that they wanted kind of a hybrid option. So that incorporates elements of a web climber with elements from a post and platform play structure into this hybrid structure. So that's kind of what we're moving forward with in our design options, which you'll see later. And so this slide just kind of shows the main categories of what we heard from people, both in person and from the online survey. We've heard, you know, the importance of the play structure and the water feature. Again, the importance of trees and shade, the importance of the basketball court, not just for the YMCA use, but for use for the broader community as well. Heard a lot about the Little League fields, and a few comments about the dog space as well. And so with that, I think I'm going to hand it off to Samir, who is going to dive into our design options a little bit more.
I think it's David, but go ahead, David.
Oh, that's right. It's David.
Yeah. So next slide, we'll talk about the Little League first. So in November, we had these 4 different diagrams that we were showing how the Little League field could be reconfigured, thinking about solar orientation, the usable space, how it's accessed, the foul balls that we know, like in its current location, there's concerns about the foul balls going into the playground area. We also know that the basketball court area is we're considering that a fixed asset. It's in terms of where things go on the site. That is a existing condition that is going to be maintained and improved. So really, when we're looking at different orientations for the Little League field in terms of how we might be able to address the concerns of access and foul balls and safety, we ended up with this option D, and it's pretty obvious in terms of the field use, the distances to the foul line, and in terms of providing accessibility in and around the backstop area, and providing a little bit more space between that and the playground. So if we go to the next slide, you can see why we ended up with this as our recommendation. Now, looking at the left side of this image, you can see in the dashed outline, that's the existing infield, and we're proposing to shift the infield over by 8 feet and rotate it about 3 degrees. And that's going to give us enough space coming in alongside the playground to have a fully accessible walkway. There's a walkway there now that's a little bit narrow. It's also going to be able to get all the way down to the team area by the Little League field and around the backstop to both sides, because what's happened in the past is, I guess, spectators will cross through the field of play to get to bleachers over on the first base line. So we've created space directly behind the backstop where we can locate bleachers, where the spectators can see the game from a very good vantage point without interfering with the field of play. And so the chart that you're looking at here shows the changes from the existing to the relocated field. And the only real drawback, if you will, to this from a field size is that the right field along the first base path gets about 5 feet shorter than it currently is. It's already undersized from a regulation size field, but it is the area that we have to work with on this existing site. And that 5 feet shorter on the right field is not a significant impact when you're considering the benefits that we're getting by shifting and rotating the field. So that inset image in the bottom right shows that space behind the backstop a little bit more clearly. And this infield will also have the dugout shelters so that it'll keep the sun and the rain off of the players when they're there. But I think that keeping this field in this general location does help to preserve the dog area so that there can be, you know, a formalized dog park in the area where it is currently being used. So if we go to the next slide, I can show you a couple of images of this image on the left is actually another Boston Park project, and we're proposing similar dugout shelters, which are basically a roof supported by posts and it's open air around. And then the bleacher that would go behind the backstop would be similar to this bleacher you see on the right side of the image.
David,
So
could
I'd
we
like,
flip off
okay.
from Little League? Could we jump back to the diagram before this one real quick? The one thing I did want to point out, if you look on the bottom of the plan, there's a possible access gate. I just want to make sure we talked about that. One of the things we heard from the YMCA is that because, especially with their team building and their youth building that they have, the ability to enter the field closer to that building for the younger kids would be really helpful. So we're looking at putting a formal park entrance gate there at the request of the YMCA. I just wanted to throw that out there before we jumped on from the field. Sorry, David.
No, thank you, Lauren. I'm glad you pointed that out. And so, like Amy said, you know, we can pause and collect feedback as we go through the presentation, but here is a good opportunity if you have any comments on the Little League field to put it in the chat. And we could continue, I guess, to the next chapter of our presentation, take those comments under advisement. We have support for the new gate location, Lauren, Dan, and Austin. Good. So let's take a look at the basketball court. We have an exciting proposal we want to show you. This is the existing basketball court in isolation, just kind of cropped it out of the rest of the park so we could focus on it. Now, there's an issue. You see the 2 arrows, and those are the points of access to the court. And currently, there's a bench for spectators or players waiting to play that's in that zone, that darker gray zone. And it's a bit of an obstruction in that overrun space, if you will, along the edge of the court. And to help solve that challenge and provide even better spectator seating, we're proposing carving out this seating area that extends through and over the wall that's there now, through the fence and over the wall. And we'll show you another image so you can visualize that. But it's 3 seats facing the basketball court where the front row is no longer protruding into the court. It's at the edge of the court. And then we have a couple of other seats outside of the fence that transition back down into the play area, the playground area. So you'll be able to see that in the next image. But because this court is somewhat spatially constrained, we wanted to make sure, if you could stay on the diagram for a minute, Yusha, please, thank you. We wanted to make sure that there was adequate, free, and clear space around the playing lines. We're also, to that point, we're also proposing to relocate the bicycle racks, which are down on the right end of the court now. Those wouldn't be in the court playing area anymore. So thank you. We can go to the next slide. So in this diagram you see in the middle, that you can see we have concrete seating that terraces down to the basketball court. The fence then goes out and around that portion of the seating. And then the lower portion of the seating, we're proposing having a composite decking material, very durable, and it's comfortable to sit on. It's not as temperature sensitive, if you will. That's facing the playground area. So that 8-foot dimension you see there is how far that projects into the playground area. And we've taken that into consideration with all of the playground diagrams we'll show you later. We know that shade is important in this park, and this is a great location to provide shade for people waiting to play or spectators on both the playground side and the basketball side. So this is an example of a type of shade structure that we'd propose over this location. Okay, and so here's another slide that we think you might have some opinions on, and so we welcome you to put any ideas you have in the chat. When it comes to resurfacing the existing basketball court, we could take several different approaches. One is to use a typical basketball court surfacing where you have, two colors and lines, and the keys in the center circle is one color, the rest of the court is another color, and then we have the perimeter, to between the edges of the fence and the court colored. So that's your basketball court dedicated to that sport. There's more abstract ways of coloring courts that makes it's more art related. It doesn't have a game purpose associated with it, but it can be a more dynamic, energizing, something that gives the court a real identity. So that's colorful painting, number 2. And then, we could make this into more of a multi-sport court where you have basketball clearly laid out with its colors, but also overlapping in that we could have other sports, things like Foursquare, for instance, you could see in the lower part of that third selection. And then, another way we could also then have more kids games, maybe in the peripheral areas or some of the solid colors within the basketball court, we could put some kid games, painted markings in there as well. Of course, when you introduce those other uses, then there's the shared use aspect of who gets to use it. And I know that with the YMCA there's a unique opportunity with this park to have them involved. They reserve it for certain times when they need it for basketball, but it could be also something that they'd like to have other types of activities painted on the ground. So if you have any thoughts relative to this, any aspect of this basketball court, the surfacing or the seating, feel free to put that in the chat. So pickleball is, if we can pause on the colors and I can, maybe Lauren, I don't know if you want to engage in any conversation here relative to some of the ideas that we're hearing. The first one that says traditional painting does have a pickleball. I think it's yellow lines on there. Of course, you'd have to bring the portable net out. That's an idea. We have one suggestion for that.
And to jump in on that, David, it's interesting. We have, it changes park by park, neighborhood by neighborhood. Some people are really gung-ho and really want pickleball, and we hear from some other communities that they really don't want pickleball. Sometimes if pickleball lines are painted, it sort of takes over, and then the original use doesn't get to be played as often because it's so busy with pickleball. So I'd really love to hear some, comments from the community, from the YMCA. If you guys think that's a good idea, if you think it's not a good idea, because that can be a little bit of a controversial one. So I'd love to get some more feedback on that, because we do definitely have some areas where we have painted pickleball lines. Mostly it's on tennis courts as opposed to basketball courts. But obviously it can be done. It's not where we typically do it. So I'd love to hear what others think about it for sure. And I did also have a message from the Y that said that they thought that that multi-sport game court would be really great for the families too.
Okay, great. Can we go back one slide for a second, Yusha? Because I see Austin was asking a question about access to the seating. So the gray seating is accessible from the basketball court side, and the brown seating, which is the composite decking, would be accessible from the playground side. Hopefully that answers your question, Austin.
And what's really great about it, having, being a parent where my 2 kids don't like doing the same things. I love the idea that, you can sit on there and actually see into both spaces to kind of keep an eye on kids doing different things, which I think is really great. The other question, there's another question in the chat that says, is there going to be any updated surface works on the court? So the court's actually in pretty good condition, but what we will do as we're out there to repaint it is if there are any cracks or any surface work that needs to be done, we'll do that at the time, but it's actually in pretty good shape with no major cracking. But we will look at that as we do the work.
So some of the comments that are the multi-sport, including the Y, the colorful painting. I'm looking through the comments that you have in the chat there, and I see some concerns about the noise about pickleball. And how, if you put a pickleball, then with its popularity, as Lauren mentioned, there's going to be a conflict of use. And I know basketball is also very heavily used by this community, which is something we heard at the first meeting when we were on site, and also at the second meeting. People use it for other classes too, which are not just basketball.
The good thing about the chat too is that we're going to keep a record of this. So any comments you put in there will be something we can continue to refer back to. So thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, and thank you all for putting your thoughts about pickleball in there because it is helpful for us to hear. So I really appreciate all those being put in there. And I do have a question, with court games being painted, you can have court games that are on sort of like the standard green and, terracotta kind of color basketball courts, or you can have them on some sort of brighter, more playful colors. And if anybody has any thoughts about more traditional basketball colors versus more playful colors, feel free to put that in the chat too.
Michael did say that the colorful look is like nice options.
Okay.
Great. Well, I think this is really helpful to get your thoughts on this. We can, I think, maybe at this point move on to the next chapter. So
Okay.
Sameer's going to be talking.
Great.
next,
So hope you are excited as we are excited when we are designing this playground. So we're gonna go through some circulation options. As part of, like as Lauren mentioned, we are showing you some concept designs, and here's some of the design concepts. So in the existing, that's on the top left, you get the 3 entrances, one from the Y. Again, all the entrances will be accessible. The one that goes from the field, the Little League field, and the one is from your main street down the road. So concept A, B, and C, as you can see, the circulation, we're trying to create some new circulation paths. And that's also allowing us to actually open up more space. The existing concept, it has a lot of space for the basketball court, but the 2 areas that are facing your main street there, they don't get much use. I mean, it's passive space, but if you see what is happening in concept A, B, and C, we are opening up those spaces to actually create some space for toddlers, which is something that we heard at the first meeting when we had in person, the first community meeting, but also overall from the survey, which we got, is that the age group, there are a lot of younger children who are using this playground, and people do come with their kids who are in strollers, and it's nice to have some kind of a play element for that age group as well. So that is a thing that's currently not there in the existing concept. So we are still going to have swings. We're going to have an expanded water play. That blue area, the little blue circle that you see in the existing, that's your existing water spray. And you can see in these other concepts, A, B, and C, you're going to have a much more of an expanded water play. And then you're still going to have 2 separate play areas, but you'll also have a little toddler area. So some of those locations of the gates on the sides, they may get shifted in some of these options. Again, accessibility is going to still stay the same. Great. Next one. All right. So now we're going to go through 3 different concepts, and all the 3 concepts, I'll tell you what the constants are. The constants are, they all going to have some site furnishings and seatings, picnic areas. They all have toddler areas. They're all going to have the same type of swings. The swings is a constant. And also the water spray feature, which we'll discuss in a bit, that's a constant. What we are now focusing on, again, the basketball little league we talked about, is really focusing on the play structures. Within the play structures, as Amy showed earlier from the survey, the preference was very strongly for a hybrid. People didn't just want a web climber structure. People just didn't want what you already have now. They wanted some mix of having those web climbing elements along with some of these post and deck structures. So those three structures are all going to be hybrid. They all have multiple slides. They all have various climbers, and they all have some type of a monkey bar. Monkey bar was also an activity that was listed as something that all kids desire. So concept A is we'll be calling it as a camp, and I think it's probably the next slide. It's based on the structure. It sort of has a sort of a teepee tent, like an open tent element out there. So what, and now you'll see these pictures again in the second slide, more zoomed out. So number one is where you see it's where it's located. Similar location in terms of what you have now, where the older kids is towards that tree, under the shade of the tree. Number two is your 2 to 5 structure for the little kids. And I'll show you the slides. The slides is staying at the same location. But because you can see how the gate has changed for the current one, number C, there'll be a new gate that goes out to the Little League fields. It opens up the space for number 3, which will be a toddler area. And for all the toddler areas, we'll have some kind of a playhouse structure and some toddler swings as well. Circulation wise, again, it opens up to a big generous space up here in the middle. As you can see, you can have a much expanded water play, and benches will be located all throughout the play space. But here you can also see a designated picnic area where you see those little 3 picnic tables. If you can point your cursor. So that would be a picnic area. And yeah, on the plan. I went to show on the plan where the picnic area is up above. Yeah, so you got a nice kind of a picnic area, which is, another thing that came up is not having picnic tables. All right, so go to the next slide. So a little bit about the structure. Now, as I go through all these 3 play structures, we'll open up in the chat what people prefer. Don't, again, choose the play equipment based on the colors. These colors can be customizable. These are just something right now as placeholders, but the slide color, for example, doesn't have to be lavender. It could be some other color. There is the post and deck that you can access the slide. So the slide can be accessed by multiple ways. So if somebody's not comfortable using the rope climber, they can use stairs, and which will have railings to use that. In all of these options, this photo doesn't probably show you the perspective, but the slide is at about 8 feet high. So it's a pretty decent height and challenge to the structure. Next slide. Again, this is for the younger children. The slide is probably just a little under 3 feet, and gonna have like a toddler sort of a playhouse, like an imaginative. And again, that can be somewhat customizable, where it can have a similar look that what we have for the other 2 structures. Next. All right, the second one we calling it is like space pods, based because when you see the structure shortly. Again, if you notice what you've seen there from the orientation of the gate from the YMCA is moved just a little bit, and you have more of a direct circulation. The existing gate is somewhat staying on the one that goes to the Little League field. But you come out to much like a larger, again, central area. You still have the picnic area. The toddler area is oriented slightly differently, but in all 3 options, it's roughly the toddler area separated from the activities from the older kids, but it's all like, anchored by the central plaza area. Next slide. All right, so this is the space parts. Again, colors are all customizable. This slide height is, again, the perspective from the photo doesn't quite show you what the height is, but the slide height is about the same, about, around 8 feet. So you'll have a similar structure for the 2 to 5. Here you can see the 2 to 5 structure is because the structure takes a lot of space. Number one, the little kid structure is moved a little bit beyond next to the swing, so it's closer to the toddler area. And then you have a similar kind of a structure for the toddlers in number 3 with the crawl tunnel. And again, we'll talk about site furnishing separately. There are some standards for Boston parks, which we will have, but also there's opportunity to have some other site furnishings like picnic tables and other benches. The next slide will show you the structure a little bit more in a close-up view. Several different climbers. It's sort of like a circular loop, if you can see in this. So, it's again, these parts are open. I mean, visually, like you'll still be able to see if your child is playing inside there. It offers multiple points of access. There's monkey bars integrated with this, just like the other one had it. And several climbers along with accessible stairs and transfer stations. Next. And again, showing you a simplified version for the smaller one for the little kids. So it's easier for that age group and also for the toddlers, which is a ground base for them to engage as well. Then we have the third concept, calling the urban tops. The orientation, again, the layout is slightly different. It's a little bit similar to what you have, but we are changing the gate that's on going to the Little League field. So it's creating a much more of a circular plaza space, a bigger space than that's currently there. Toddler area is still roughly staying in the same area which we had in the other two concepts. And again, the structures are next to each other. The older kids on the lower right, and the 2 to 5 in the middle, and the swings. And if you go to this play structure, okay, again, you can see, again, this is again a hybrid structure. We're trying to make sure that whatever we're doing for the older kids, the younger kids also feel that it is a similar type of a play experience for them. Because oftentimes we've seen that when we design these parks, if you have two different structures, the younger sibling wants to play. We're trying to create the same experience in all of the three playground options. So again, here, several different climbers. Same thing which I made the constant is the height of the slide. The taller slide is roughly about 8 feet in all three playground options you're seeing. Just it's more about aesthetics, that there are different types of climbers in each of these options. And number 3, again, that can be somewhat customizable, but that's an option for the toddler, or we can go something that's can try to match the style of 1 and 2. The next one. It shows you a little bit close-up views now of the structure. So again, there's a little kind of that bridge climber that accesses it. A slide for at a lower height, so the constant I'm mentioning is each of these structures have 2 slides, one which is at 8 feet and the other at a shorter height, around like 5 feet or so, and different climbing opportunities. Next one. Here you can see, you got the steps for kids who are not able to use sort of the net climber. And there's a little crawl tunnel and this slide at a lower height, and the toddler is accessible at sort of ground-based activity. Okay, we'll go through Lauren, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show them the site furnishings and also the swings, and then come back and then pause for feedback.
I'm wondering, Samir, if we want to go back while these are fresh in our mind before we get to site furnishings, if we could go back and just let people comment on each of them now that they've seen all 3.
Yeah, I just wanted to show them the swings. That's all. Next slide, and then we'll pause. Okay, so these are the swings that are constant in all 3 options. So regardless of which you choose, see right now you only have 2. So we are expanding the swings you have. Again, it's because of the existing mature trees. We want to protect all the mature trees, and it's a good sized playground, but it's still to have all the elements, 2 different play structures plus a toddler. We are able to squeeze in a basket swing as well, and that's what we're proposing for toddlers. So toddlers can have 2 swings. With the older kids, you got 2 bell swings, and those basket swings are popular for group activity. So with that, as Lauren said, we'll go back and flip through those options. And if people already have formed their opinions, feel free to put them in the chat. And this is going to be a discussion. So you shall go back to the previous slide. So this was, yeah.
We go back to concept A.
Yeah, go back to concept A. Let's start there.
Perfect.
Okay, let's pause there. Yeah.
It's a great one. So again, these can, please think of these as sort of mix and match between some of the concepts, because what we want to understand is what you guys like or don't like about each of them. If you like the water play on one versus, the play equipment of another, we'd love to hear that. So please feel free to raise your hand, put things in the chat. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this concept.
Any kind of thoughts on this particular structure? If anybody wants to put in chat.
The preference is A or B. I like the use of space most in A. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. We'll let people absorb this. We'll give one of the just like few seconds for you to take a look at this play structure. Then let's go to the concept B. You shall go to the overall slide. And next one. Yeah, can pause there. Yeah.
Anybody have any thoughts on these particular pieces of play equipment too? Okay. Concern about the toddler. And in terms of the comment about the toddler space maybe not being as good, is that in terms of the play equipment itself, or is that about the location of it? I'm curious from the chat.
So I think Benjamin, go back, like I think you're
Okay.
the concept B, that looks like the toddler space is a bigger space. And concept A, if you want to go back to it, the layout is good, but it may have a small, no, it's actually roughly about the same space.
But it's good to know that it feels that way.
Yeah,
for
it feels
sure.
that way. Yeah, it's roughly about the same size, even in concept A.
This is great. Keep the comments coming. Yeah, and one of the things somebody made a comment about an enclosed house would be tricky, and I'm glad you brought that up because that's definitely something that we always think about in the parks. And that particular playhouse that's number 3 on the screen right now, I actually put one in very similar to that same manufacturer at Jeep Jones Park in Roxbury, maybe about 6 to 8 months ago. And I had the same concern, and I worked with them so that the 4 walls are not solid. They actually were more of a mesh, so you could definitely see in them, but it still had that playful feel of a playhouse for the kids. So if a playhouse in general is something people are interested in, we definitely have ways of making that so that you can see through it, keep an eye on kids. Nobody's using it for a bad activities. So that's good to hear, and I'm glad you asked because that's definitely something we think about.
Yeah, great comment, and thanks for mentioning that, Lawrence. And I mentioned that, like, this playhouse, we can customize them based on the option of the structure you like. So let's look at concept C, and then again, because we looked at A and B, you sure if you're gonna go to. Okay. Any comments on concept C layout? Okay. I think overall, nobody's saying alien tentacle.
Alien tentacles. I think what it is it's trying to be a little bit playful for the kids. I know sometimes I had a designer that used this equipment that almost treated it like an underwater theme. So they seemed like maybe it was pieces of seaweed. And, I don't know if you can see on the larger equipment, the number 1, it's almost like there are bubbles on that panel. So sometimes playgrounds are themed and that can play into it. But yeah, I think it's just so that it has a little bit of fun, a little bit of height, and a little bit of color.
Yeah.
But from a play value, you're right. The things sticking up in the air don't add any play value per se.
No, it's about a visual interest, like it's like giving the accentuating the height of the structure. There is a comment of no roof, which is a good point because 2 to 5, Benjamin as a comment, would get a lot of direct sunlight, the hottest part of the summer. And based upon this structure can come with some kind of a canopy. I think they can add, there's some customization. So it's a point we'll take into note for the 2 to 5 being in the sunny area to have some kind of a shade with the structure. I think for number 1, the big kid structure, it's a lot of shade. The tree is very mature tree there. So that area gets a lot of shade.
Yeah, Samir, I don't think Benjamin's comment was just pertaining to concept C. I think it was
I
in
know,
general.
yeah, in general for 2 to 5, yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think all of these structures have options for different roofs. So depending on which orientation we pick, we can absolutely look at getting more roofs and more shade. And at least I know my kids, they are under the equipment in the shade and making, each of those little spaces where they're under the little platform, a little playhouse or something like that. So there'll be the shade underneath, but we can also look at additional shade above too.
Okay. There is a comment about having a small slide for the toddlers. We'll definitely make a note of that. Somebody likes the circular water feature a lot in this design. Yeah, so in this one, probably I feel like maybe your plaza is probably a little bit larger than A and B. If you go back to again, Yusha, do we have a slide showing all three side by side? No. Did we? Further down? Okay, it's on the, okay, go, yeah, go with the previous one. No, that's fine. Actually, the next slide, if you were you saw all the three.
Yeah.
Yeah, if
Mhm.
you can see, like now you're sort of seeing these again. Ignore the color pattern, the options. One of the things, for the camp, because it sort of evokes a campground feel, we thought like we could have some nature colors, but it doesn't have to be just browns and greens. It can still be colorful and playful. For the other two, you have a lot of color options to choose from, but this lets you see sort of A, B, C layout and the structures, the main structures, sort of at a glance. Is there, I know there's how many, Tammy, like how many we have right now? Like we got at least good, a lot of like, yeah, a lot of people who are on attending this meeting. Is there
14.
is there a structure that you don't like you want to rule out? Is there anybody wants to put in chat and see if others agree? Like we have three. Is there one structure you feel like maybe gets ruled out? And then we choose between the other two? Okay. Someone did start the conversation, does not like C.
Apologize. That's why
Oh,
we're
the
here.
C, the
Nobody needs
C,
to apologize for not liking
sorry.
things.
Okay,
Oh,
C, when we see is in this order, is C
That's
was the
why we're
urban
here.
tops. Okay.
That's why we're here. So I appreciate everybody putting those in. And Samir, did we want to jump back to look at the, do we want to jump back and look at the site furnishings now?
Yeah. Do you feel like Lauren, we can people have continue on the play equipment choices or?
I think we can go look at that, and then if people have other
Okay.
thoughts, we can go back to it.
Okay. All right. Let's continue. Continue putting your thoughts about the concepts A, B, and C, the camp, the urban tops, of the space parts. Okay, go back to the
So
slide again.
Samir, sorry, just one point of clarification on that slide. The urban tops and the space pods were reversed, right?
Yes,
So
it is reverse. Yes.
space pods is B,
Yeah.
urban tops is C.
Okay.
Just if people are referring to them, why don't you refer to them by name?
Okay,
Just
that's
so that
what
we don't get any confusion.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, so we're referring to them as the camp, the urban tops, or the space pods. Again, we'll continue the rest of the presentations, but continue to chime in your thoughts on the chat. So you shall just go back to where I left after the swings. What is the previous slides? No, go back. Yeah. Go back. Go back. Okay, so we talked about the swings. Again, if anybody has any comments about the swings, put them in the chat. But I think, the group swing will be popular with older kids, and the toddlers also having a separate dedicated area. Those swings will be appreciated by that group. Next slide. Okay, swings look great. So the standard furnishings for Boston parks, you probably some of them seen at the Boston parks. We'll make sure there's plenty of trash receptacles throughout the park. We'll use the standard bike racks. The bike racks, as David mentioned earlier, right now they do not make sense. They're in the basketball court. We'll make sure they are somewhere by the entrances where people actually access the park by bikes. So we'll have an appropriate location for the bikes. And we want to make sure the benches we provide are inclusive for all age groups. So benches with the armrests that you're seeing, the metal benches, they are Boston Park standards, and we'll make sure to incorporate those as well. In addition, the next slide, there was a lot of interest that people mentioned in the previous meetings about wanting to have a picnic area. So want to make sure, again, this picnic tables with back, they are comfortable. All of these picnic tables will also have accessible seating. There's another example of a bench we're showing with armrests. And we also wanted to show some fun site furnishings. We did get some positive feedback on that circular bench that you're seeing, the yellow bench. Again, it allows for a group of people socially to sit together, or also for kids to play on it. So any thoughts on the site furnishings on this page? Okay. Now I'll move on to the next slide.
And I think one of the other questions that would be really great for me to know too, when we're looking through this is, do you guys want tables and chairs? When we put tables and chairs in, like these are showing, we would make sure there's some for wheelchair access. But then, do you guys want the tables and chairs, or just picnic or just benches enough? So those are the kind of comments that would be really helpful.
Yeah, right now I think we are showing about 3 picnic tables, in the space. It could be 2 picnic tables and more benches, but kind of in the design, we have several benches and about 3 picnic tables. And in any of these concepts, if people do like the round circular seat, we can incorporate that as well. Okay, definitely like having tables and chairs.
I also would be curious if people have thoughts about whether they like a pop of color on some of those furnishings, right? Like our standard benches tend to be like black metal ribbon bench, but sometimes with the tables and chairs, it's an opportunity to kind of put a fun pop of color in the play area. So feel free to comment on that as well.
Okay. Go to the next slide then. You can continue to chime on as Laura mentioned about, having pop of colors, liking that for the tables and chairs. So this is showing you now the 3 sort of the areas with the concept for the splash pad. All 3 actually are, the gray area is like maybe the spray pads be associated, but it's kind of integrated into the plaza space. So the plaza space can be used when the spray feature is not being used. And what we're proposing is in-ground jets. Right now, I think you only have really 1 spray jet. So we're proposing several here that can be activated, and they offer different experiences like single stream versus more like a fountain. And again, various heights to engage the kids, like from a toddler to slightly older kids.
And Samir, we've also shown, Yushal was able to dash in on all of these, the size and location of the existing splash pad as a point of comparison.
Yeah. The red circle is sort of what your current space is for the water splash pad area. So all of them offering you much bigger space for the splash pad, and also generous space from a plaza when it's not being used.
Right, exactly, because that's the kind of place that, during the winter, it becomes a place that kids can use to draw chalk, artwork, kids can run around, do other things. So we're also looking at sort of where that water play goes so that we make sure that that space isn't underutilized when it's not hot out too.
Okay. Yep. Okay, this is great. Anything with more cushion ground at the splash pad would be great for kids to run through. There's a question about that concrete bench, and
Do you want me to take that one, Samir?
yeah, take them. Yeah.
So that was a question that we asked at our first couple of meetings in terms of how people felt about it. And, we had some people who said, oh man, families really love that. They love sitting on it. We had other people that said that there are a lot of families that are really concerned about it because kids slip and they hit their head, worried about it for safety purposes. And so what we had heard was people seemed to be okay with that coming out as long as there was adequate seating close by the water play for parents that wanted to sit close by. So if anybody has any different opinions, or if there are any concerns that, oh my gosh, that has to stay, please let us know that in the chat too.
Next one. Okay. And again, here we are showing you, this is like, this is where we want your feedback to. We're showing you sort of different color schemes. One that's sort of, more like nature themed, the browns and the greens, again, with some pop of color, or really bright colors like the blue, purples, yellows, oranges. So again, if you have any thoughts of terms of, this is rubber surfacing. So I think we forgot to mention right now, all of this playground play structures for the toddlers, the little kids and the older kids is going to be safety rubber surfacing. And with safety rubber surfacing, you can do some fun patterns and fun colors. So if there's any particular thoughts on colors, wanting to have more of a neutral color scheme or some bright colors, please put that in the chat. Okay, a lot of people agreeing okay with the bench going, the concrete wall. Okay.
Great. Yeah, we just want to make sure that we're not that we're hearing voices in case there were concerns with it.
Okay. Any other comments on this page? I know Austin says the purple seems unique, but anything that makes the park stand out is nice. And that's actually a good comment. Anything that makes the park stand out.
Like colors and unique patterns. Great. Thank you, Michael.
Okay.
Are there any colors that anybody says, oh, that just doesn't feel like our park? Any of these can be cohesive? Yes, with the basketball court. Yeah, and
Agree.
that's
Yes.
why we wanted to think about repainting the court too, is so then everything feels fresh and feels like it's cohesive and coordinated throughout the park too.
Okay. Great. I think it's all some good comments. People okay with the colorful site furnishings as well as, it does not have the chipping problem. And we'll make sure these are very durable powder coated site furnishings.
Samir, before we get too far from the site furnishings, I did just want to say something that I just realized, and I apologize, that's not on our site furnishings page, is drinking fountains.
Yes.
So one of the things that we will be doing as part of our standard Boston Parks site furnishings is we will be putting in both near the playground and the field, putting in new drinking fountains that also will be bottle fillers as well. So just one.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. Again, this is just a suggestion. I think if folks went with the sort of the campground feel, it can have a little bit of nature, but again, want to make sure we can have some pops of color like bright yellow. So it's not just browns and greens, or you introduce other colors. But the other two concepts can lead to some much brighter colors. Next slide. All right, so we heard from Lauren, we heard from Amy, and we had a consensus at the first meeting. We do understand there's always, some residents who do feel strongly about having dogs in the park. So there will be all kinds of signs and rules. Boston Parks has standard signs that will be when this gets formalized as a small dog park. But here are some of the elements. The surfacing right now, which is just really dirt under the shade of the trees. That's the standard rice stone surfacing. We've been actually specifying this at other dog parks in other communities as well. And there's a general consensus that's best for smaller dogs as well as larger dogs in terms of maintenance for facilities at Boston Parks, but also for dog owners to clean up after their dogs. We'll make sure that we'll have a double gate for the entrance of the dog park. And again, it will have a dog water station and some seating as well. Okay. Next slide. And again, folks who are attending this meeting, if you have dogs, I know dogs like to play, and there are several dog parks, have different play elements. People do like those little tunnels. Either it could be sort of that concrete tunnel or that made out of the rubber. This park is not that big in terms of the dog park size wise, so we don't want to overcrowd it with the agility activities, but you have some space for things like that balance thing that you see one on the lower left. But also sometimes it's boulders that dogs can hop on, but also can be used for seating. So any thoughts on some of these dog features? If somebody wants to comment in your chat. Good comment about wanting to have some seating near the shade. Yeah, there are some nice mature trees already in your dog park. So we'll factor that in the seating.
Austin, I'd love to hear if you want to put it in the chat. Was there an issue with the concrete features that your dog got hurt on, or was it just that there was concrete in general? Just trying to understand as
So
we're
I think with the flow of the park, right? So making sure that there's ample space to run around if there's 3 dogs together, because some are not coordinated, and so they will literally just run into concrete because like a toddler. So that's the only concern I would have.
Okay, so it's more about placement of where the features
Yeah.
are in the number.
Exactly, right? Like dogs just need space to actually run around in. And as long as it's in a central area. So having this agility equipment is great, but like you already said, that there would be it's small. So
It's small, so 1 or 2. Yeah, we're only talking about
Yeah.
like 1 agility and maybe 1 crawl tunnel. Yeah.
And there was also comments about rice stone, and that's what our standard is for Boston Parks as well.
Great. I think that was really our last slide, and we another half an hour. I think we got good consensus on a lot of this stuff. Do people want to have any more strong opinions about the concepts or the play structure? There was somebody had some concern, Lauren, earlier in the chat, was somebody possibly hiding in the space pods in the night. I don't know if that was something.
But they're
Talking about one of the things, and it's a little hard to see in the renderings, but they actually are more transparent than
Yeah.
they seem like in those renderings. But that is always a concern that Boston Parks has. So we definitely look at that with any of the play equipment that we would put in. But I appreciate people pointing it out because it is something that's really an important thing to look at.
Okay.
I had 2 questions. One is, what is going to happen? Like, does this project at all have anything to do with the pathway that commuters use to get from Faneuil to Washington, kind of cutting through the Y?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with
Okay.
that. It's just a separate project that Boston Parks has as part of our capital improvements.
Okay, awesome. And then the second is there any like other multi-use plan? Like I was a little confused by like the gardening/picnic area, or like event space in the playground. I don't think there's much room for it, but I was just curious if like that's at all something talked about. I think it might be too small, but I was just curious.
Yeah.
Are you
So
trying to figure out if there is enough space for that?
Not, or if there's just any idea of that kind of mixed use, right? Like if there's enough picnic areas, is it going to be like a event space, or is it just like for the play group at the time, like people
Yeah,
playing on the playground at the time? Okay.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. So typically in, the seating in any of our playgrounds would really be just for family and, community use. Often when there's a seating area in a playground, we have people that ask for permits to do, a family birthday party or that kind of thing. But typically it's not going to be a large enough plaza to have, food trucks or an event. But it does have some nice seating for some small gatherings.
and Austin, to add to that, if you see in all the 3 layouts, the layout where how we are repositioning some of the gates and the circulation, we're creating actually much more bigger plaza space. So as Lauren said, for a small gathering, it will feel bigger than the current space, just because how we're configuring the spaces. Because when those splash pads are not being used, that's really like it's a big plaza space. And it's sort of centrally located in all 3 concepts. So these are all in-ground water jets.
I think it would be really great if we could come away from this meeting with some consensus on which plan configuration people like, and then what play structures. I know that the play structures are custom fit to each individual option, but we might be able to make some mix and match, right, with the play structure and the site plan configuration, right, Samir?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
people
Lauren,
like-
looking to your feedback, because if we were to go and have a 4th meeting, probably won't at that point show one
It'll be the preferred option. That's the goal.
preferred
When we
option.
come back, we'll take the feedback that we get here, any feedback that we get after the plan has been posted on the website as well, so that we can gather feedback from anyone who hasn't been here. And then we will come back with that final plan at our next meeting. And again, make sure this feels like a park that listened to all of the feedback and meets the needs of the community as well.
Great.
So thank you, Benjamin, for your vote.
Yeah.
What I'm suggesting is if you like the Urban Tops plan layout, that diagram on the left, but you like the camp play equipment, we could find a way to put those two together.
I see. Right. That's a good point that David just mentioned. So the layout is more about the circulation, and then there's a strong feeling about the layout and versus the play equipment we can try to, and I think Lauren mentioned that as well. So we'll take all of this feedback into consideration.
So how about if we first now, just as we are wrapping up, we say anybody who wants to voice their opinion on the plan circulation, ignore the play equipment, right? Just what's your preference for like first and second choice for the plan configuration? Just use the same name.
You can just use the
Urban
names,
Tops,
yeah, the camp
space
or
pods. And that would be helpful.
I think people did. David chime in.
Yeah. Austin likes the plan C configuration by far.
Yeah. Okay.
And then separately, if anybody wants to state an opinion on the play equipment, make sure it's clear that you're referring to the play equipment when you mention which one you like.
Yeah, thank you for the comments. As Lauren said, we'll factor in all of what we're receiving in the chat here.
Thank you, Carrie.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all. I appreciate everybody's time tonight, and I appreciate all the feedback. This has been really, really great. I also want to just make sure everybody knows that once we plan and finalize that fourth community meeting, I'll be sending out emails about that meeting. And so if you didn't hear about this meeting from me, please feel free to put your email in the chat, send me a message. I'll put my email in case you want to reach out to me as well. But then that way you'll definitely hear about the meeting once it gets planned. So I am putting my email in the chat again there. So please let us know if you want to be on that email list. And we look forward to coming back to you guys with a final design. So I appreciate everybody's time tonight.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.